just opened my browser. It's all.
And this doesn't seem like it's working.
It doesn't.
I
This
know.
is not.
I got the wrong one.
I have one in my bag. I'll bring it to you. I have one in my bag.
Okay. It's fine. I just don't. Do you have a paper copy? I don't have a binder, so that's why I'm doing. I didn't have one. Only thing I had was the Ways and Means one in my desk.
Hi, Mayor.
Give me a. Okay. Fine. Once you make copies, don't worry. I'll just follow the. Oh. Oh, yeah. Just bring it up. Okay, thanks.
Hey, Dan, is that door always locked?
We lock it now so that people are not coming through.
Oh, so
Okay.
come through the back.
That's a very good idea.
That way they don't interrupt the presentation.
We're thinking about locking them all.
Oh. Trying to move it.
Hey.
Huh?
Hi.
Hi.
Good.
I'll go back to work, right?
Good. That's right, 'cause Alex had, Scott had asked me for some recommendations, and there are people that oh, she's so I know. Yeah, I know her husband too. Yeah. We know them from the governor's club. Yeah. And plus she works out. She's friends with your wife? She's friends with your wife? Yeah, I know him a little better than her, but they're both very nice.
All set? We ready?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call our April 5th Town Council meeting to order. Could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please. Here.
Mr. Prickett?
Here.
Ms. Conley?
Here.
Mr. Moffitt?
Here.
Dr. Parker?
Here.
Ms. Tillerson?
Here.
Mr. Wilson?
Here.
Thank you. We have 4 sets of minutes to approve. 2 of them date to our planning retreat on January 13th and January 14th. go through them one by one. The minutes of the 13th, could I have a motion to approve, please?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
The 14th, motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
On discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, Petra. Those were complicated minutes. There was a lot discussed, so job well done. February 8th. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
And the next one we do not have, correct?
Correct.
Correct. And the next one is March the 1st. Could I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Mayor's update, I'll be very brief. If you recall, the town acted as an intervener on the utility water case. We had a report from Jack Pringle 3 weeks ago. And if you get a chance to read the minutes or watch it, the result is it went very well. And it's concluded. It was concluded the 24th or something like that. So it is done. But a substantial reduction in terms of the rate, a substantial reduction in the proposed rate increase that the utility company had asked for. So it was a very good effort, and I think Jack, we did very well with Mr. Pringle. So anyway, just wanted to mention that. If you get a chance to look at the tape, it would be well worth your time. Okay, citizen comments? Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Maura McIlvain, 146 Blue Heron Pond Road. I have two comments, one on behalf of Reform It Now Kiowa, and one with respect to the Architectural Review Board presentation. The second is a little difficult to comment on since there was nothing with the agenda that tells us what the presentation is, but I'll make my comment anyway. The first with respect to Reform It Now. We have appeared at 4 or 5 meetings, had separate meetings individually with staff to work on an annexation manual and also to revise the plan development ordinance. Both Stephanie and John have been incredibly giving of their time and very receptive. We reached an impasse in the last couple of weeks over certain language. And the focus for us was in the annexation manual, 2 provisions in particular. This morning, I'm happy to report, the mayor got us through the impasse, let me put it that way, and gave us different language that Stephanie sent, which we are very happy with. I sent just a couple changes, which are typographical in nature, on the second of the 2 provisions on 2.2, but we did want to commend the mayor for working with us specifically on this issue, and council and staff for everything they've done to help us get to a place that we think is really a good place to be for the citizens and for the petitioners. So we did want to express our appreciation and also explain that we think we've gotten past the impasse we had a couple days ago on language. So that's, I think, good news for everybody. Moving from Reform It Now, with respect to the ARB issue, and I assume we're going to get to the clear-cutting question because I assume that's why most people are here. As a citizen and as a town resident, obviously I have a lot of concerns about that, and I have a lot of concerns in context. I understand the notice that came out from the town, but to describe what happened as a discrepancy, I can get cited for a lot of things that aren't clear-cutting, and they're not discrepancies. It's a language issue as much as anything. How the town council and how the town communicates with the residents is very important. It looks as though if the partners do something, that's a discrepancy. If we do something, that's a citable offense. I don't think the town and the mayor mean to convey that message in your messaging. So we need a better communication strategy, because that word in particular is really offensive. That is not a discrepancy. That is not a discrepancy. So we need a new communications system here for this. Secondly, right before the PGA, there was a big problem with one resident who clear-cut a very small area for presumably a better view of the PGA. And there were messages from the town, and there was going to be an investigation, and Jim Jordan was out there because 2 kittens had to be moved in a bobcat den. That is very important. That response from the mayor, from the town, from the council was very appropriate. I'm not seeing that response. We are talking about a wildlife area. If you look at the bobcat tracking material, that is an area that Jim Jordan should have been all over, and this town should have been all over worrying about protecting. So I merely say, I think the town needs to give some answers, but I'll wait to see what the ARB's answer is first. Thank you.
Other comments?
Good afternoon, Mayor and members of the council. Brad Belt, 151 Bobcat, member of the Riverview POA Board. Most important matters first. A shout out to the boys in Carolina Blue for an extraordinary run through the NCAA tournament yesterday, and a bigger shout out to my Kansas Jayhawks, Rock Chalk Jayhawk. I just wanted to get that on the public record. As Ms. McElvain said, I think it's extraordinarily disappointing that we're not going to have the opportunity to question and comment following the ARB's presentation. That certainly would have been our hope to do so. All right, thank you. So I'm going to hold off on many of the questions that I've raised in other fora. We'll just have to wait and see what they say. A couple of observations at the outset, and you know, I will certainly agree with everything that Maura said. This is not just about the Cape. It's about future development on Kiowa Island. Parcel 13B is in the works right now. The Beachwalker parcels are on the table, have been proposed. And the question is, are we going to be looking at the same types of actions and behaviors that result in inordinate destruction of critical maritime habitat on Kiowa Island, which has made this island so special? And this isn't an anti-development screed. I don't think anybody disagrees with the notion that responsible development is what Kiowa Island has been about heretofore. But it's a question of what has transpired recently with regard to Cape, and what does it augur for future development of the undeveloped parcels on Kiowa Island. I'd simply like to cite, if you will indulge me, from the town of Kiowa Island's vision statement. Low-density development that is being designed in harmony with nature is consistent with this vision, while tall, massive buildings are inconsistent because they dominate the landscape rather than blending in and meshing with it. Large buildings should be located on large parcels or lots and should be set back from property lines to reduce their visual impact from streets, the beach, and other open space. From the Designing with Nature standards, which are part of the development agreement, Kiowa Island's natural setting offers a unique environment that must be recognized and preserved as a framework for development. The island's special natural environment is economically fragile and is difficult to replace once it has been disturbed. Significant trees, in areas of understory growth are essential natural and aesthetic resources. They play a critical role in purifying air and water, providing wildlife habitat, enhancing natural drainage, and controlling erosion. These trees and shrubs contribute to the quality of life on Kiowa and are an inseparable part of its historical legacy. Consequently, the Architectural Review Board is most concerned with trees and shrubs and established these standards to assure their preservation. I think everyone can make their own judgment as to whether or not what has transpired at the Cape is consistent with the town's vision statement and the standards set forth in Designing with Nature. The other issue pertains to what I think more also addressed as what seems to be a double standard. There are numerous provisions. There's a widely held view when I talk to folks that, well, it's the ARB and the developer and they can do what they want to do, and they will do what they want to do. But the fact of the matter is that the developer and its agents and its successor and signs are bound by the development agreement terms, which include the Designing with Nature guidelines and standards to the same extent as any other property owner or homeowner. And there is not general discretion under the development agreement for the ARB, the developer or its successor signs, to arbitrarily ignore or waive the standards that are set forth therein. There is no general discretion accorded under the development agreement. There are specific provisions which accord the ARB some limited discretion. There are others which do not. Very clearly in the development agreement and in the Designing with Nature standards, there is the word shall apply certain standards. And those pertain to a lot of what has transpired at the Cape, including retaining natural barriers, buffers around the property lines, and other things. I'm not going to go through those in detail. I would like to have had the opportunity to respond to the presentation by the ARB. So we'll just have to see what happens next, and then we'll have to hopefully be informed about what to do on a go-forward basis. We understand, I think we all understand, that the developer's interest is to maximize its monetary interest. It has a fiduciary obligation to do that to its investors. Our hope and expectation is that the town will look out for the community's interest. And where the developer is requesting something or stepping over bounds that are specified, that are objective standards, that they will be held to account like anybody else, and there will be an opportunity to revisit the development agreement on an as-needed basis on a going forward. With that, I thank you very much, Mayor and council members, for your time and attention.
Other comments? Okay. Tommy, you're going to start it off? Or is Jen going to start it off?
Yes.
Tommy. I think you've clearly gotten a summary of the types of questions and concerns that the community has. And we're all anxious to hear your response. So you got it.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. We appreciate this opportunity to come before everyone here today and speak about the ARB's process, and specifically how that process was carried through in regards to the Cape development at Lot 2, Parcel 13. I would also like to thank East-West Partners, the owners, and their design teams for their willingness to share their documents and drawings with the community today. Before we get to addressing the Cape specifically, we felt like it would be beneficial to everyone here to remind everyone that the ARB is open to inquiries from the public. And this is our website. You can go to arb@kiowaisland.com. There you will see on this page our standards and guidelines. Whoops, sorry. And that will take you to this page where you can download the Designing with Nature guidelines as well as the neighborhood supplemental guidelines. And I'd also like to point out that our phone number and our email address is clearly visible on the website, and we welcome inquiries from the community. The ARB's Designing with Nature guidelines are applied to single-family and larger projects such as multifamily and commercial developments alike. All new projects, regardless of their size or type of use, are required to complete the ARB process. This is the same process that the Cape development went through. As many of you here today know, the ARB process is divided up in phases, right? And we begin with the site analysis phase, where we have the owners and their design team to meet with us on site to discuss the unique characteristics of their property. And so that we, the ARB, can voice our, make those issues known that we think are important to the site. At conceptual review, we're mainly looking at, big picture items: access, placement, massing, composition. Then we move into the preliminary review, and that's where we get into more of the site development details. And we're looking at a preliminary stakeout and in the field of the plans being proposed. And then we also get into tree protection and grading. And then finally, at the final review, we have a dimension site plan. We also review a schematic landscape plan at that point. And then once construction has begun, assuming final review is completed and approved, the project is permitted, and during the construction phase, we have a on-site plan review with adjustments in the field 90 days prior to installation. This is the process that the Cape went through. Regarding the development further, I just want to say that the ARB process includes submission of all required survey and site documents. The ARB applied the same standards, guidelines, and processes to this development project that it does to any other project that falls under ARB purview. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Hayes, our landscape coordinator, who will walk everyone through the timeline and the specifics as they relate to the Cape, the approved site development, tree protection, as well as the landscape plan and mitigation that's being required.
The review process for the Cape started with a site analysis meeting in June of 2019 with submittal of a site analysis package, which included a completed tree and topo survey for the entire parcel. Myself and the ARB director at that time met with East-West Development and their design team to assess the existing conditions, which included looking at hydrology, the vegetation throughout the property and the plant communities there, the existing topography, and the existing trees. So all oaks greater than 3 inches in caliper were surveyed. All other species 6 inches or greater were surveyed. And in fact, the tree survey was more comprehensive than our guidelines do require. What you'll see on this plan is and I've got this pointer to point out some things. The trees in red are the trees that are over 24 inches in caliper, which are considered grand trees. So I just wanted to point out a few items. What we noted on site was that this cluster of a few grand live oaks was very nice in shape and form and health. This cluster of oaks and pines, while not grand, all together made a very nice canopy. Similarly, there's a grand oak on this side, along the side property line with timbers. Another cluster of oaks, each small in their own trunk size, but overall large. There are a few other grand trees in this zone, and then again another smaller grouping of oaks that make a nice cluster. Okay, let me get this pointer straight. Okay. In addition to looking at all of those elements and the trees throughout the site, we also take into account at the site analysis the existing conditions and the neighborhood context. How does this parcel sit in relation to its neighbors? From there, the design team East West came up with a conceptual submittal, which the ARB reviewed in October of 2019. As Tommy mentioned, at this point, we're looking at large elements related to the site planning, as well as the massing of the buildings. From there, you submit for the Cape project submitted for preliminary submittal in January of 2020. At this point, we get into a little bit more detail in terms of egress, fire truck access, pedestrian movement, building locations getting further tweaked. And we do that through taking a closer look at the grading and drainage plan, which is developed both to meet the ARB aesthetic requirements, as well as the county and the state stormwater requirements. So when you're looking at this development at this stage, you need to note not only, wrong button, sorry. Not only the building locations, but also the stormwater location, retention location. So as you look at this plan, it is showing you that this area here is their stormwater retention area that's required to meet the county and the state requirements. The ARB's review of that is to make sure that it looks good in the end, which it very much will. But that impact on the site is something that should be noted. That's separate from our review process, and I believe separate from the town review process. Okay. At preliminary review, we also ask for the site plan as it's developed at this stage to be staked out in the field. And the purpose of that is to show these buildings in relation to their site so that we can really envision what the impact is going to be on any valuable site features that we are looking to preserve. That was done for this parcel 13. This is what that looks like. It's flagging, and we stand out there and we look up and we determine whether or not the pruning impact or the root impact on trees that are considered valuable features are actually able to be preserved, or is there some tweaking to site plans and things that needs to be accounted for at this stage? At this point, at preliminary review, we are also looking at tree protection and clearing. And so this is the start of the tree protection plan. It's a little bit easier to see on this plan, which is why I'm showing it to you. And what you'll see here is related back to the original site analysis plan, where we pointed out that there was a large cluster of oaks at this corner. Those are being protected on this plan. There's another large oak at this side property line being protected. There's another cluster of oaks at this corner that in the field was deemed to be a very unique feature, low-growing dune oaks. And then those two double live oaks along this other side property line, which you saw at the site analysis sheet, is right here. This is what that plan looks like in terms of the tree protection fencing with the site plan added to it, okay? So again, here is that double live oak group. Here's this other oak cluster. In addition, they're preserving kind of the tree canopy along the road. Although none of those are of any grand size, together they make a nice canopy and buffer. This is the grand live oak along the side property line with timbers. And then here in green, you can see the protection of the dune live oaks. This tree protection plan, which was submitted at preliminary review, was also submitted at time of permitting and is also out there on the site right now. The clearing that was done matches this plan. The final board review process is final submittal, which was done in March of 2021. As you can see, it's an extensive package. This is just the landscape architect's drawings. We've picked out a few plans that we think will be of interest and address the questions that have been raised about the project. On this plan, which is the overall planting plan, which is what we call a schematic design. It's your intent of what you plan to revegetate. It is not a final planting plan. That is reviewed in the field 90 days prior to installation, so that the final plan can be tweaked to address any changes that have occurred during construction, which happens whether it's a large project like this one or a single family residential home. So the schematic plan had a call out right here, the bottom that I've highlighted, and it says, note, approximately 50 small caliper existing live oaks and pine trees to be field located by landscape architect. The second sheet has another note that I've highlighted, and that says existing live oak copse to be transplanted to dune garden. The final plan will have a dune garden in this zone, final planting plan, as well as here, in this stormwater retention area. Okay, so keep those two notes in mind. This is the plant schedule, which details plant varieties and species that are being proposed. This is a close-up of the tree protection and fencing plan, because I know it is hard to read at such a bigger scale. But here's that fencing outline of those wind-pruned live oaks. as well as protection of the grand live oak along the shared property line with timbers. Here's a close-up of the fencing for the street buffer, as well as for along the side property line and the grand live oak there, as well as for the double live oak in this zone. Here are some images from the final landscape set submittal that shows what is intended to be created at the end of the project, with the recreation of some dune areas within the project, as well as the creation of substantial buffer along the side property lines. Here are some additional images of the dune garden area. Some additional details of materials. And then this is what we call a tree count analysis. And it is a way to frame for both the owner and for the ARB how many trees are needed at the end of the project to achieve our goals of settling a project into an environment. And the parameter that is going to be used for the Cape project is this 70% of existing trees. So 70% of the existing trees that were there at the start, that were on that tree and topo survey, they need to be there at the end. And whether they are existing or new or a combination of both, that's kind of a benchmark for us to know whether or not we're getting close to the intent of meeting the guidelines. So as you can see, the existing tree canopy within this parcel was primarily small pine trees. And to meet the 70%, there would be 216 trees at the end of the project. The current plan shows 232 trees at the end of the project, which is 74%, which exceeds the ARB requirement. This is a rendering of the final landscape plan that you can see shows in it those trees that we saw at the very beginning at the site analysis. So here's that double live oak. Here's the street buffer with that larger cluster of trees. Here's the grand live oak along the side property line. Down here is the dune garden and wind pruned oak cluster. So going back to the highlighted 50 saplings of live oaks and pines that were to be transplanted, and the live oak cluster that was to be transplanted in the field. During a normal site visit, the ARB stopped and asked the contractor where were those field transplanted trees. And we were informed at that time that the decision was made due to the heat of the summer, the risk of these saplings surviving transplant, that a decision was made to not transplant those saplings. I reached out to East-West Development and to the contractor and to their design team and let them know that, you know, the plan that was submitted said that those would be transplanted, and that those would be transplanted in the field. And any change to a plan that is submitted to the ARB needs ARB review and approval. They got back to me within 2 hours and let me know why they decided to not transplant those trees. And if the ARB had been looped into that decision as we should have been, we would have agreed with that decision to not transplant the saplings. So the issue was one of process, not of unapproved clearing at this site. We have worked with East-West Development and their design team to correct that issue, as we would with any project under construction, by requiring a mitigation plan. So this is the original landscape plan. This is the mitigation plan. You know, graphically it shows you the new trees in bright green. This shows you the caliper difference. So 50 saplings, a cluster of live oaks, which was this cluster down here, not being transplanted in the field due to the heat of the summer, the lack of place to put them, the risk of them not surviving the transplant, especially for this cluster of live oaks, which was very horizontally growing and would have been, you know, very difficult, if not impossible, to move, which they didn't know until they got out there with the equipment and had some of the area around it cleared and could accurately see that root ball. So the new trees that are going back in are between 4 and 7 inch caliper trees. And that's for the mitigation. There will be trees up to 14 inch caliper installed on the site, totaling 310 inches of caliper mitigation. To try and give you a sense of what this all means, you know, in 3D, here's a picture of some pine saplings, obviously, that were considered to be transplanted from that site. Here's a picture of a 6 inch caliper live oak. Some will be 4 inches, some will be 5, some will be 7. Okay, so that's kind of an intermediate sampling. Here's a sample of a 4 inch and 6 inch magnolia, which will be used as part of that mitigation plan. So we hope that clarifies the issue and the questions regarding the CAPE and the ARB's review. And we very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you and shed some light. Yes?
May I ask just a couple of questions that would help me?
Sure.
So in my layman's terms, and thank you both, in looking back, you should have been notified by the developer or the developer's contractor that they were going to vary from their plan. They were going to take out some trees that were going to be temporarily transplanted and replace them eventually with what amounts to mitigated trees that are now going to be 310 inches more, but they didn't tell you that, right?
That's correct.
So that was the mistake. But in looking at it, you said, well, had we been told, we would have concluded the same thing they did, which is they're not going to survive transplanting So you're going to have to replace them with a higher caliber tree, right?
That's correct.
Where does the term discrepancy first come up, since we've been accused of inventing it here? What's a discrepancy?
Well, that communication is from the town, so I'm not sure that I'm the best person to answer that question, am I?
I thought a discrepancy was what it's called when there's a violation of it's not. Okay.
That's not an ARB term.
It's
no.
not an ARB term.
No.
Okay.
Mm-mm.
Good point.
We would say that what happened, in our lingo, we would call it an unapproved design change.
Makes sense to me. Okay. Great. Thanks. That's very helpful.
Thank you both. Couple of questions? Oh, go ahead, yeah.
So you've got this mitigation plan that you and the developer have agreed to. If they get to the end and and you go out there and they say, well, this isn't all these trees, and they say, well, yeah, we're not going to do that. What happens then?
The project is not completed, and the letter of credit in this case that is being held is not released until the terms of the construction are
Would
met.
they not be able to get a certificate of occupancy either?
No.
Well, a certificate of occupancy is a town
But
approval.
if the project's not approved, in theory, they wouldn't get a CO, right?
I can't answer that because one of the things, and maybe John knows, because the CO deals with building and not the landscape, so John may know. Would Bruce issue a CO? I know we work close together. Or would it be a temporary CO until they comply with ARB's landscape plan?
From a site plan review, if
John, you may have to go to the mic so the community can hear you.
from a site plan review standpoint,
Sorry about that. If from a site plan review standpoint, if the ARB hasn't signed off on it, we can say that the project is not complete, and so that could prevent the issue. Yeah.
Right.
Jen, in terms of the process, the standards, quality checks, what's the basis of monitoring? What's the frequency of site reviews, and is that, well, what's the frequency? How does that take place?
Once it's permitted, or,
Well, this was basically a 2-year project, and it's obviously a very large project. Is they're just part of your jobs to have site reviews, and you're out there and you're seeing this?
It is, and there are certain points at which that happens automatically. But given the questions related to this project, our site reviews have increased.
Okay. And you mentioned, if I heard it right, a board review process. Who is that? How is that? That's your board.
Correct.
And
So the board review process, so we have a staff who reviews things in the fields, and then the board review process happens at conceptual, preliminary, and final.
your board.
Yes, yeah. And as proposals come in and those phases, different stages come in, Jen and I review those, and we make recommendations to the board at our monthly meetings. And that's when the board members themselves weigh in on the project.
So at some point in all of this, you informed your board of this situation?
Yes.
Struggle
Yes.
with the word. What was were they satisfied when you told them that if you would have known about it, you would have approved it, and that there was a mitigation plan underway?
Yes.
I feel very badly about if people got upset about this term discrepancy. I think we were trying to inform everybody that we were going to have this session and have you here. And we're seeing this now too. And you've done a very fine job in terms of preparing it. I don't know how it was wordsmithed and what we heard, but obviously we didn't use your words, whatever you referred to it as, but as Dan said, I don't think we invented it, but Mary Ann, sure.
Jan, is it normal to have a contractor change plans midstream?
Well, I wouldn't say that they changed plans midstream. I mean, the field decision that they made, something like that, yes, it's very normal.
Without having the ARB notified? Excuse me, John.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Without having the ARB notified?
No, it's not normal, but it certainly does happen.
And how long ago did you realize that this took place? Was it last week, last month, last year?
No, it was.
July.
It was last
July.
summer. It was last summer, right? Yeah, last summer.
July.
Last July.
That's correct.
And we just learned about it very short time ago.
Well, again, I think you're explaining that. What obligation do you have when there's a, tell me that word, tell me those words once more.
Unapproved design change.
Unapproved design change.
That's
When
correct.
there is an unapproved design change, who, by your guidelines, who are you obligated to tell?
Well, it was an unapproved design change to plans that were submitted to the ARB. So, I tell the ARB.
The ARB board.
Mhm.
Is there any obligation at all to tell the town anything?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
And what about East-West Partners?
Yes, yeah.
I'm sorry, can you expand on your question?
Were they notified right away when this
Yes.
mistake
Yes.
was
Yes.
made?
Yes, they were. Yeah. They, the contractor, and their design team. Yes.
And what was the reaction?
They got back to me within 2 hours, literally, from my email. I mean,
With the mitigation plan, or?
with the explanation of what had happened and why, and that, I mean, their reply came in after hours. And so from there I said, okay, we need to meet and get on the same page. And that's what we did.
I don't mean to summarize for you, but as far as you are concerned, the preparation for the construction of this project is consistent with what you had approved.
Yes.
Other than, so that is really the real great big issue here, that I think has everybody concerned because of the looking at it now and seeing it. The unapproved design change, whether it was a mistake or a discrepancy or an error in judgment, as far as you were concerned, it was an unapproved design change. You would have made it anyway. Apparently the contractor satisfied you that there were good reasons not to do it and there's mitigated and things like that. Let's not make that all like it's one big thing, So you've explained to everybody in terms of your responsibilities, and you've discharged those responsibilities, and you're satisfied that that's the end result of this project.
Yes. We have a commitment from them as represented in writing and by plans that will be met, and we'll look for it to be met.
Scott?
Were there
anything?
any other changes like that?
No.
Just that?
Any other comments, Scott? Dan?
No, I met with them yesterday afternoon, and we had this exact same presentation, and I was very satisfied that they had a process. It's the same process for everybody. Something went off the rails, and they dealt with it as they normally deal with it, and they treated it as just a matter of this is the way we do business, and did not feel that they had any obligation to notify anybody because the issue was going to be fixed. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, that's how I took it yesterday.
I'd just also like to add that not only is it fixed, but it's going to be, it will be improved upon.
You get more trees.
Mary Ann, anything else?
No, thank you, Mayor.
John?
Okay for them to sit down?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Should we, I don't know, okay.
Oh, maybe one other question. if and when the community at large have questions, observations, concerns about, we know who to call when it's our own, the paint on our own house, but, when something like that happens, they can contact you. So clearly, anybody who has questions relative to this project or any project, they can contact you.
Yes.
What's your attitude about responding? Do you share with them the rationale, explanations?
Well, go ahead.
Well, most certainly, we're here to share the process and clearly describe the steps that we went through with the owners to get where we are. And if there were missteps along the way, those are addressed expeditiously. Yeah.
So if our community residents have questions, and that they can contact you.
They can, Mayor, I would just clarify that we were able to share the drawings and the information today because we had approval from East West Development, who wanted the community to know. Our communications with owners are private, typically.
Understand.
And so, any additional release of information would require that approval.
Understand. Okay. Just I too had met with Jen and Tommy a week ago. We are seeing it's not the conclusion, it's almost the conclusion, I guess, in a couple of years, of a project that goes back a long ways. And we are going to try to collect all of the information that had been sent out about Parcel 13 way back when, its genesis. These are decisions that were made by multiple councils, multiple public hearings. I don't know how far back, but it goes back a way. Try to put all of that together. I think the community will find that to be of interest. It's just a lot of history that as people have changed and people have moved around, they may not really realize what was going to be built down there and what will be built down there. Okay, thank you guys.
Thank you.
There are 3 items, A, B, C, under consent approval. Approval of the proposed revise for website design, approval of the Air Med Care contract renewal, and approval of purchase of new town vehicles. These were all reviewed at the Ways and Means Committee. Could I have a motion to approve all 3?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Tab 6, no. Yes, 9, excuse me. Councilman Moffett, do you want to present the fruits of your efforts?
So a few meetings back, the mayor expressed some concern with the noise.
Do you want it up on the screen?
No. So a few meetings ago, the mayor expressed some concerns over the noise ordinance that we had taken our first reading on, specifically about the word disturb in that ordinance, and that was a pretty ambiguous word, that disturbed to one person wasn't necessarily disturbed to another. So what he asked was that we take a good look at this noise ordinance and see if we could remove as much ambiguity out of it as we could and make it something that everybody understood, generally had consensus on what were the pros and cons in the noise circumstances, and make it something that our code enforcement officers could enforce without too much subjectivity when they showed up at a complainant's house. And so we formed a committee that there were 8 people. There were representatives from each of the constituents on the island, the resort, Kika, so forth. Everybody had a representative. And then we had 4 regular citizens that were not part of any of those constituent groups. So I think we had 8 people. And the citizens that were on it, this is coincidental, they lived at various spots on the island. So we had some that lived all the way out at Ocean Park, all the way back down to West Beach. So their perception of what was noise or disturbances was very different. Personally, my biggest issue is Mingo Point in the summer. I don't have to deal with weddings that may be at the Ocean Course, but somebody lives at Ocean Park, that's their predominant noise. So we had a really good collection of people to build this ordinance. So we took a look at ordinances from maybe as many as 10 communities on the coast, and we talked to some code enforcement security people at Sea Island and at Palmetto Bluffs, and to see how they address noise. We looked at Mount Pleasant is in the process of redoing their noise ordinance, so we looked at what they were doing, and we came up with a noise ordinance that collectively met the requirements of all of this group. And along the way, we've bounced it off of several other people just to be sure that we were at least in the ballpark. And it addresses, what constitutes prohibited noise, what are the hours of daytime, what are the hours of nighttime. We made it consistent with what KICA has as their operating hours for construction, for lawn care, and so forth. And so what we have, and we also obviously got Joe Wilson to look at it from a legal standpoint, and got some opinion on whether it was something that could be enforceable and so forth. So what we've got now is a noise ordinance that is very structured. It has, as I said, prohibited noises. It's got hours. It's got the maximum decibel levels that can be considered the threshold of a violation at those different times. And we believe that it's a very clear, easily understood, easily enforced noise ordinance. Anybody that gets a visit from a code enforcement officer, if they haven't read this by that time and read it shortly thereafter, they'll understand why the guy showed up at their door. There's very little subjectivity. The code enforcement officers can't kind of decide, oh, well, this really shouldn't be a big deal. It's right in the ordinance as whether it's a pass or a fail. So that's what we tried to do. We reviewed it with the mayor and with Stephanie and with Joe over the past couple of weeks, and I think we're ready to go.
Okay. This is the first reading, so could I have a motion to approve, please?
I so move.
Is that your motion, John?
She moved.
Oh, you moved it? Okay.
Yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Discussion?
I would like to start. I think this reflects an awful lot of really good, hard work, representing input from all of the appropriate parties and interested parties in it. And I think that you've done a really nice job with it. That being said, I have one part that it's a little ambiguous to me in terms of how to read it. And so I want to make sure. And it's the special events, outdoor entertainment, and live entertainment. It deals with events at the entities of the resort, the club, Fresh Fields, and KICA. And it says that they've got daytime hours from 8 to 10 p.m. Okay, that's great. But the next sentence says, found in activities associated with other events for which a special events permit has been issued and subject to da-da-da-da-da. What are those events? Can you give me a specific example?
Well, I might be an individual that gets an event permit to have something in my yard. It's
okay.
it could be. Could be. It's not likely, but we have to provide some provision for things outside of the hard and fast entity-driven.
Okay. And so those people are held to a different standard, though, in terms of their time.
If they have an event permit.
Yeah. But they're held to a different standard. It's Monday through Tuesday, 8 to 8, not 8 to 10.
Right.
Okay. Then the only other thing, that just clears it up in my mind. So Darius Rucker is going to have a concert with 1,000 people, and he's going to have a mega wall of amplification behind him.
Yep.
Is that going to be a problem?
Could be. Could be. I mean, he'll have a permit, and he has the different hours, but if you can hear that inside of a residence, or you can hear the thumping of the bass in the inside of a residence, it could be a problem.
Okay. Just want you to talk about it. And then the only other thing that I have is you've got some very technical specifications in the definitions, and I just wonder if that doesn't open you up to, well, somebody says, well, show me his training certificate. Show me how the machine got calibrated. Show me his...
So that was a specific item we talked to Joe about, and we believe that if with our decibel meters and our code enforcement officers, Joe, jump in if I misstate something. If they write a citation, or they go in and they try to get people to quiet down and they refuse, and they then subsequently write a citation, and the people take it to court, there is the chance that the judge might say, but wait, you don't have these decibel meters certified, and the operator is not a certified sound engineer. There is that possibility. If you look at our history, it's rare that we ever get anything to that point. Mostly the knock on the door resolves the problem.
I'm just asking the hypothetical.
It is hypothetically, that could be a problem.
Okay.
But that's going to really be up to the judge.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
Just one comment. I appreciate the fact that you reached out to the extent you did in getting members of the community who aren't just residents involved with this, because we've got resorts and clubs and so on, and I know they were all involved in this. That's good.
Yep.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
No, Mayor.
Okay, call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. We got ourselves the first reading of the noise ordinance. Well done, John.
Thank you.
Under tab 10 is an item that comes to us from the Ways and Means Committee. This chart has changed a little bit from what we reviewed last week. And you can see what we're really looking at are the 2022 Ways and Means recommendations, and the other columns are there. So could I have a motion to approve, please?
I so move.
I'd second.
Okay, discussion?
Yes, Mayor. I have a question about Keeper of the Wildlife Rescue and Sanctuary. And I don't know if anyone's aware, but the eaglets that were just identified, the ones that just died, were sent to this organization. They did an analysis on the eaglets that died, and it turned out it was from avian influenza, which is not unusual. It's in the air, it's not something that's unusual. But the fact that they were able to do that, and the fact that they are continuing to investigate and study avian influenza, leads me to believe that when considering the well-being and health of our wildlife, that this organization should get some money allocated to them. They asked for $3,000, and I would recommend $2,000 for this organization.
Okay.
So I would say since we were 4,000 short on doing our whole 200,000, that was one that we discussed at the Ways and Means as well. And I'm okay with putting the 2,000 back for that one.
Okay. Procedurally, Joe, help me out here. So we have a recommendation from the Ways and Means Committee. Can I take this as the motion, or do I have to take the?
Yeah, the recommendation would be the original motion. And
Right.
It sounds like that's
It's
an
gotta be
amendment.
Being amended.
Yes.
So I would go through the same procedure as we do with an ordinance. Put the main motion on the table.
And disapprove it?
And
No.
No.
And then take into consideration what Marion is saying as an amendment to what's on the table. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
We're-
I'm
it's-
sorry, I had to throw one more kink into this because it just happened quickly. Ms. Conley has to abstain from one, and she just
Right.
voted on, so you're gonna have to also pull the Habitat one out,
Right.
because she can't vote on that. So essentially, you're gonna have to have, we should have had two separate motions
Okay.
before, but now since we haven't, so she's abstaining, she has to
I am
abstain
abstaining
From the
from
large-
voting on
from the large
Habitat.
one.
Yes.
Yes.
We have to revote the
So who made
first
the
one.
motion on the second one?
Okay, Dan, as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, can you make the motion?
All right. All right. So I'm going to restate the first one, right? We want to deal with the first one first.
Right.
Yes.
All right. So I move that the recommendations from the Ways and Means Committee
There you go.
for spending $195,704 be approved.
Is there a second?
Second.
I will second that.
Now, you need to abstain.
I abstain.
Right, but we're not even voting. This is
Right.
technically now we're in the discussion
Okay,
period.
discussion.
So you
And
now want to
She can
amend.
make her motion
Okay.
to amend.
So you can make the motion to amend.
I move that we,
Just on, yeah, she's, just to be clear, she
She's-
just
adding the
specific
$2,000.
thing that she's not recused on.
Right.
Okay.
Right. I move that we allocate $2,000 to the Keeper of the Wildlife Rescue and Sanctuary. And this number does not interfere with any other allocations here.
Okay, is there a second?
Is there
Second.
Okay,
in discussion
discussion on that, on this, all of it,
on the amendment?
on the amendment?
My only slight concern, Marianne, I'm in full support of funding these people, but other organizations who are worthy organizations, we elected not to fund because they generally didn't fall under the, let's call it health, housing, and what's my
Hunger.
word? Hunger
But this does.
categories. But you would consider this health?
I do. Health and well-being of our wildlife,
I
which
would.
is a very important element. I feel.
That's what I'd like to clarify. Thank you, Marianne.
Any other discussion?
So now we vote on the amendment.
All in favor of the amendment?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, now we vote on,
Now we can go to the proposal as amended.
all in favor of the
Without-
proposal as amended?
Are there any other discussions or
Any discussion?
amendments? Or-
Yeah.
I abstain.
Correct.
Marianne abstains. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. I'll get this
That's
down.
as the amended, the resolution as amended has just passed.
Resolution, just passed, okay, thank you, thank you. It's like a mental block with that stuff. All right, under tab 11, this is, it was mentioned earlier, this gets back to what we talked about in January and February and a number of discussions, and this is the result of two sections that was mentioned that were still hadn't fully been able to meld together. And over the weekend, hopefully you were able to read some proposed language for sections 2.1 and 2.2 of the annexation ordinance that we're currently under review. So again, where we're at with that is that we're getting close to the end. And I think Stephanie would like to take this to the Planning Commission in May.
Yeah, so the actual annexation policy is not a planning commission approval, but what we would like to do is just share this with them. John is actually taking the zoning ordinance text amendment to the planning commission, and ultimately, those ordinances, if there's no changes, they will come to council at first reading next month, and then we'll have the public hearing. And then when we bring everything back to you in June for approval, we're going to include the annexation policy at that time. Annexation policy will be approved via resolution. So everything will just come together as one packet. You'll have an ordinance, and then you'll have a resolution.
Okay. So this, as we have done before, is to provide Stephanie direction in terms of the language to incorporate into those ordinances.
Correct.
So any comments from council relative to what they've had a chance hopefully to read?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. No. Good work.
So the version that came out over the weekend, everybody kind of finds acceptable? And
Yes.
with some edit, grammatical, good. Okay, you're good. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Town administrators report.
The only things I just wanted to do is just give a couple of updates for you all in case you have any questions. I was just looking to see if Brian was here, but Brian, would you like to quickly give any updates on the Sorrel project? Yeah. And then if any other public works comments you would like to update on, that'd be great.
Good afternoon. So the last word that we heard from the architect is that we will be getting those construction-ready drawings from him this week, I believe is what he said. He's got all the information that he needs from Carolina Waste, and as far as what we have out there right now that's going to convey over to the new design. So the construction plans are slowly but surely going to make their way to us, at which point we will be ready to have it sent out for bid. I'll have everything already prepared, so pretty much the day we get it, we'll be able to push that out for construction bids. are there any questions about that at this time?
No, Brian?
Is there an unfortunate chance that we may be having this project under construction come 4th of July and Memorial Day and things like that?
Right now, I would like to say no. I would like to think
that the project could possibly be done?
that is what, it's not a really big extensive
I
project.
understand.
Just following the assumption that we are going to be getting these drawings from him this week, then we can get it sent out and have it out for just enough time to make sure we have competitive bids back and can select an appropriate contractor to get the work done. And we can certainly add that into the RFP that this needs to be done by a certain date. Again, with it not being a really extensive project, I don't believe, and without fear of misspeaking to you all today,
Careful.
I don't believe that 4th of July will be impacted.
Okey doke.
So that's what I have for that. Also, too, we have wrapped up the new landscape around Town Hall, less
Fine.
a couple of plant species. Those are going to be coming in next week, and they're just going to fill out. And those are just smaller perennial plants that they're going to be throwing in the ground for some added color.
Well, as someone who drives in and out of this place more often than I'd like to, it is much safer now.
Much safer.
I can see around the corners. I can see what's going on. Getting rid of some of those plants was a big improvement. Thank you.
Good.
Plus, it looks nicer.
And I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I can't remember if I wrote this to you, but I've had a request that we add some flowers around the sign on the entry to Kiowa.
Yes, ma'am. I have passed that along to the landscape architect, and they're coming up with a plant selection that we're going to be able to put in there
Thank you very
sooner
much.
rather than later. Yes, ma'am.
And before you leave, can just give a quick update on Beach Walker Drive project.
Right. So we've got True Luck is our contractor for that project, and in correspondence that we had with him yesterday, they're going to have a crew out here as early as the end of this week to begin that construction. And we've got this information going out in an e-blast tomorrow to the community. As early as this week, we'll have construction starting on Beachwalker Drive. No later than the beginning of next week is when we'll start that
And
project.
just to be clear, it's the bike trail adjacent to Beachwalker Drive. There's
Correct.
Not really do anything to Beachwalker Drive. We don't wanna
With
get people
the
too
exception,
excited.
right? With the exception of the raised crosswalk that
Right.
extends over to Dune Side. But yes, sir, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
that's
thank
it.
you all.
Thank you, Brian. That's all that I have now, unless you have any specific questions for me.
Okay, thank
No?
you.
Okay, that's it, Mayor.
Council committee updates? John, anything? Mary Ann?
Yes, I'd like to comment that I think we're having a public safety officer in Craig Harris has really contributed a lot to the community and to our ability to enforce some of the regulations that we have. One of the comments that we kept getting in the past was that we have speed limits and they're not enforced. Well, they are being enforced now by our deputies, and the result of that is that most of the speeding is not done by visitors, it's done by residents. So anyone who had a concern about this earlier will know that we're doing what we've been requested to do. I think the sheriffs handle it very, very carefully, but that is working well. Craig has also developed a great relationship with Kika representative, Carl Nelson, is that?
Carl Ritchie.
And they are working together to resolve some of the other more major issues we have, like traffic, so,
Good. Thanks, Mary Ann. Anything else?
no, thank you.
Scott?
I'm good.
Dan, anything else?
Oh, just one thing. The mayor, Stephanie, and John Taylor and I had a chance to meet with the county staff earlier this week about segment C, the roads that we've all been following for 20 or 30 years now. There'll be an important announcement coming from the county probably later this week, if not early next week, about a new set of road options for us all to consider. Pay attention to them. They've changed some. Some of the earlier options have been dropped, some have been changed, some have been added on importantly.
On the 28th of this month, and then on the 12th of May, there'll be a public hearing meeting at one of the churches on Johns Island to discuss these. Once you've looked at it, and we're going to look at it as a town and get out to you with our thoughts on the options for you to look at and consider, but these are important because they're going to potentially change our road network to get back and forth to town. We need to be seen at those meetings, heard at those meetings, otherwise other people are going to have their voices heard. So as soon as we've looked at it and have some ideas, we'll get it out to you, and through the community association ourselves, tell you everything we can about what's going on with the roads so that your voice can be heard out there. This is important. This may be the last time in 5 years we get a chance to improve these roads. We've got to pay attention to it. So we're on it. We will get the information to you. I ask you to be active as you are on these roads because this is our last chance for a while to get them improved. Okay?
We're exploring transportation, even if that becomes an issue. And that, I mean, this is, like Dan said, it was really, you couldn't leave that meeting yesterday unimpressed with the fact that there were two councilmen. They want to hear from the community, and they need to hear from us. So this is, regardless of our agreement or disagreement on a myriad of things, this is something I think all of us are vested in, and we all need to get as many as we can. Why? Well, the folks from Johns Island, all well-serving, have a major political active nature in terms of how they want to see the roads in Johns Island. And it came out in the discussion. It really doesn't solve a lot of the problems, but they will be there en masse. They will be there well represented. And again, you don't want to, I mean, they're our neighbors and you want to be respectful and all that type of thing, but it isn't a good plan. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, anything else? General comments? Anything? Citizen comments? Yes, sir? Oh, I'm sorry.
My name is Paul Hennessy. I live at 12 Blue Heron Pond Road. First of all, thank you for the noise ordinance, and I have a question about that ordinance. Is that in scope here?
Sure.
So one of the most ubiquitous and penetrating noise disturbance, in my experience, is gas-operated two-stroke leaf blowers. They're everywhere. And so my question is simply, when you developed your standards, did you test against leaf blowers, individual landscapers, town, Kika, because that is noise pollution. By the way, it also happens to be unbelievably damaging air pollution. But my question has to do with the standards that you have adopted and how they might impact what is now ubiquitous use of gas-powered leaf blowers.
There's nothing specifically in the ordinance that approves or disapproves gas-powered leaf blowers. There's times that lawn care, golf course maintenance, and so forth can be done, but it's mostly time-based. But there's nothing in there to specifically outlaw the use of a gas-powered.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and I don't have a problem with that. My observation from a quick reading of the document was that you had established decibel levels. And so my question is, if my neighbor's landscape gang is there doing their thing with these gas-powered leaf blowers, is that going to be within the decibel level or in excess of the decibel level?
Well, there are exceptions principally for lawn care that would exclude them from the normal daytime hours as well as the decibel level at the present time.
So they're accepted from the standard?
The decibel level standard, if you look, it's hard, section 15804 is the decibel level standards, and subsection 2 is the exceptions.
Okay.
And that's at the bottom of
Page 4.
Page 4.
Okay.
And so if you read that initial language under exceptions, it explains what how
Right.
they work together with the rest of the ordinance.
You're talking about emergency equipment and so on and so forth?
Well, if you go down to E on the next page,
Commercial lawn care operations, including residential, may not start before 7
Mr.
a.m.
Moffett is referring to.
Okay.
So what you're talking about would fall under commercial lawn care operations.
Well, that's not really my question.
So here's the,
Well,
so read the first statement in the exceptions category. It says,
Yeah.
the following activities are not governed by the above decibel level limits.
Right.
Okay, and that's an exception is the law.
Mm-hmm.
But activities that constitute a noise disturbance, as is defined in this ordinance, could still be in violation even if they're within the time range.
Okay, so the answer to the question is commercial lawn care operations, so long as they're not before 7 a.m., et cetera, are accepted from this whole standard,
The decibel standard.
the decibel standard.
Right. There's
Okay,
still a-
that answers my question. It's crazy, but okay.
But isn't excuse
well,
me, Dr. Parker, isn't the Environmental Commission looking at this?
We have looked at gas-powered leaf blowers and electric leaf blowers. And the electric leaf blowers at the current standard, at the current time, are not applicable for commercial work use. They don't last long enough, they are really heavy, they are hot, and they are very, very expensive at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, so the short answer to my, thank you for that. The short answer to my question is, commercial landscape on the island is not subject to a noise standard.
No, it's not subject to the decibel level standard.
What, right,
It is subject to the subjective standard of what is a
Noise disturbance.
a noise disturbance. Right, there's a subjective and an objective standard.
okay. Again, I just find it odd that the primary source of noise disturbance that I observe is being accepted from the objective standard. That seems weird to me. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Yes, sir?
David Satch, 9 Nicholas. The ARB said they went through the same process, but the question seems to be, are they subject to the same standards, commercial versus residential? So when we built our half-acre lot, I probably saved 78 trees on my half-acre lot. So 78 trees that were saved on this seems a different standard. I'm subject to a 40-foot high ceiling on my house. I mean, that tower from the 15th hole at Cacique is not 40 foot high. Yeah, I have a lot coverage that I need to meet. I have setback rules that I need to meet. I think Brad gave you some, we have some tools as a town to ask these questions. Yes, they went through a process. I believe they did it as best they could. But were they subject to the same standards? And if not, they probably did violate some design standard. And we should do something about it. And the reaction that I seem to get from you is that you want to move on from this as fast as possible. I think it's a mistake. That's it.
Thank you. Yes, sir?
Alex Fernandez, 418 Snow Egret. I believe we all can agree that the largest asset in Kiowa is our trees, the canopies, and the wildlife that's part of it. And it's disturbing to know that if I park my bike on my driveway I'm going to get a summons because it can be visible from the road. But then I learned that the town does not have an ordinance to protect our largest asset, our trees. Now, that doesn't make much sense to me. I can't park my bike overnight on my driveway because I'm going to get a summons, but there's nothing to protect our trees.
Yes.
I believe that, priorities have to be reset, and I urge the council to move forward and protect our trees with a city ordinance or town ordinance to protect those trees, that wildlife that we have, that is our largest asset. Thank you.
I'd like to address that because we actually addressed this in our strategic retreat. And two of the things that we, in our strategic retreat, talked about was a tree ordinance and then also a signage ordinance.
I know that we received a communication from the town that said we do not have a tree protection.
Yeah,
We
Right,
don't,
we don't.
no, we identified it in the strategic retreat as a deficiency that we need to correct.
Too late now for the Cape, right?
Well, it's never too late. I mean, it's gonna be too late for the Cape no matter what we get.
The ARB has a tree requirement.
Not that it's not protecting.
Everyone, anything else? Any other
Anything
comments?
else?
I just have one comment.
Yeah.
Jerry McGee, 17 Inlet Cove. My comment is disappointment in that we were cut off from a process. I think we should have been able to ask the ARB questions. They put on a presentation, and the only way it appears that we can get back to them is by individually contacting. I think they have to stand up here in front of us and answer these questions so that we can hear as a group what their responses are. I think that's fair. I think that's proper process. I don't think it's being disrespectful to the process, but by not letting us have a voice and that we can hear as a group what their responses are, because there is a tremendous amount of distrust now about the motives and what the partners are trying to accomplish by bypassing some of these things that appear. And maybe all that's wrong and they could clear it up, but they should have to stand and deliver in front of us. Thank you very much.
Can't they ask the questions now while the board is here?
Just a general question, Jen. As the town association, there are so many things that are published. Your standards, your guidelines, commercial, residential, et cetera, those are all published
On our website.
on your website. So the extent to which anybody wishes to compare one to the other, that's available to them. I can't speak for Jen and Tommy. We invited them here under those conditions, and they met them. I don't think it's fair to them to do it other. You've heard the community, folks from ARB. There's a general level of concern. I'm not going to ask you to step back up here at 3:30, but we should talk more. I don't know. I hate to have all of this go unanswered. I don't know what to do. I don't know unless you want to do this at 3:30, but that wasn't the condition. That wasn't the deal. Amanda, do you have a?
My name is Mark Primar. I live at 81 Dungannon Hall, but I'm here on behalf of being one of the ARB members.
Amanda Mole, I'm the Director of Architecture for Human Partners. I'm also the Chair of the ARB. So I did feel that, we do thank you very much for the opportunity to try to answer as many questions as we could through the presentation. I actually thought that most of the questions were answered, so if there are specific questions that were not answered, I think what I've heard so far is sort of more generalities, but if there were specific questions, maybe we can try to address them now.
Great. Thank you. All right. Yes,
The
ma'am.
the other thing I think we could consider at some time in the near future, whenever is convenient for anyone, is maybe we could have a workshop where the focus for that workshop is the ARB topic, not just about the topic that we're talking about today, but the entirety of it, because it's not unusual to have levels of concern about, well, why was this approved, why was that? And, I'm talking about a broad spectrum. That way, I think the nature of the exchange, which would be really healthy, I think would be really healthy, could be the focus. Although if it's important to answer key questions today, I think we're standing here ready to answer those questions.
All right.
I would recommend, though, that in addition to that, somehow all of us get together in a workshop and we have that as a topic.
Right.
And we can present, you can submit to us some homework assignments, and then we can have an exchange and then outcomes. And maybe that happens once a year. I mean, I think we're all touched by the ARB in one form or another.
Right.
Right.
Well, let's do that. Let's, if there's a few specific questions, but I think the notion of a workshop is very appropriate and probably very, very fair. Somebody made the comment, about trust. And, we start getting into this issue of absence of trust between the entities that are present here on the island. That is certainly not productive for anybody. So, but let's make, yes ma'am, go ahead and make a question.
Yeah, I think if everybody came up to the mic, announced who you are, state your question, then step away and they can answer it into the mic, then others can hear you. Thanks.
Terrific, thank you. Maura McIlvain, 146 Blue Heron Pond Road. One of my concerns is the slides were not that visible and they went quickly. So part of my question is predicated on what I think I saw by way of trees. What I think I saw was there were 420 trees on the tree survey. Now the tree survey were all oaks with a greater than 3-inch and all other trees with a greater than 6-inch. So that's not all trees on the lot, on the 14-acre lot, but those were the trees on the survey. Then I wrote down that 78 were saved, but then 55 were to be transplanted. I don't know if the 55 was in the 78 that were supposed to be saved, but 78 wasn't really saved because the 55 weren't transplanted, or whether the 55 is in addition to the 78. But what I came up with, assuming 78 trees were saved of the 420 on the survey, that's 18.6% of the trees on the survey on a 14-acre lot. Now, I'd like to know if any individual home project has ever been approved by the ARB with only 18.6% of the trees saved. And
So is the question you'd like to know how many trees are left, how many started, and how many are going to be left? Because they could get to that.
Well, but the percentage of trees left, is that a percentage that they've ever allowed on either another commercial project or a personal residential project?
Doesn't include the trees that they're going to plant, so you have to look at that after the fact.
Oh, I understand it doesn't include what they're putting in. I understand that, but 78 were saved, 18.6% were saved.
I don't think that's correct.
Jen, that's
let's
a
answer
fair question. And I guess what I would ask, we start throwing numbers out, it's going to be very difficult to grasp. Could you prepare, you kind of got the gist of the question. Could you send us a chart, send us the data in terms of, kind of taking that chart that you had showed us earlier? We'll publish it. We'll make sure everybody in the community understands relative to trees, counts, saved, removed, etc. And
But I think she said 70%.
well, yeah, but God loves these people, but there's a lot of concern out in the community. I want to send something out that's accurate so that no one has misunderstandings relative to what they're hearing. So if you want to do that now, Jen, that's fine, but if you could send us the information so that we can send it out. People need to understand factual data.
Sure.
We make there are too many judgments exercised based upon, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I just want to understand the question, right? So it sounded to me like there were two questions there. One was a broad-reaching, has there ever been this percentage of trees approved ever before on Kiowa, right?
On a house.
Was that one question? That would be fairly difficult to answer. So I just want to get at the heart of what it is that would be helpful, and that is that's different from what we've supplied already.
As we noted earlier, the town doesn't have a tree ordinance.
Right.
So we can't exercise judgment relative to, like, nails in the building or all that type of thing. You do. So I think the question really is the level of expectation, the level of compliance relative to a commercial project versus a residential project, and especially a commercial project prepared by your owners. The level of consistency between other commercial projects, and then the consistency or inconsistency between that and residential projects. And there's this whole issue of trees. So we will get feedback from, we must have it in terms of questions relative to that, or maybe you could provide it so that when we prepare the response, it's really explicitly relative to those types of questions, factually.
Mm-hmm.
Is that fair enough?
Maybe more if you write the question.
Yeah, that's we just, okay, thank you, ma'am. Thanks, Jen. Yes, sir.
I don't think so.
Brad Belt, 151 Bobcat. Let's shift across the street to Southern Pines. My understanding is the standards specify that there should be no site clearing unless first there's been a Kiawah Island building permit obtained from the ARB, and that is after final approval and all the processes, dimension, site plan, what have you. There has been a substantial amount of tree clearing on parcel 13B. Is the site plan available that is associated with that, those tree removals?
Conceptual site plan.
Is a building permit been issued?
Conceptual site plan that allowed for that level of clearing, similar to the level of clearing at West Beach for the hotel involved.
Mark, where is that found in the development agreement, that language? Because I'm reading right here the standard that said no site clearing may begin without first obtaining a Kiawah Island building permit from the ARB, and an ARB may be issued only after final approval is granted from the ARB.
Can you hear me? Yeah. What we can do is.
Go to the mic, because other people can't.
I'm sorry, yeah.
What we can do is provide you the backup for what limited clearing was done there for the infrastructure requirements of timbers, for you saw it on one of the drawings, and the temporary parking area for member access to the beach, and the limited clearing at the west end. We can provide you the information for that. I can't do it today, like right in front of us, but I can provide you.
But I'm trying to understand, it says no site clearing may begin without final approval from the ARB. Has final approval with regard to development of 13B been provided?
May I clarify just really quick? The initial clearing was done as part of the stormwater and state requirements that needed to transpire in order for the whole parcel, including the timbers, the cape, and then the other parcel as well. So it was a holistic.
All the new clearing that's just been done since the start of
I'm sorry,
the Cape
excuse
project?
me, Amanda, just because we have people live stream, we have to speak in the mic.
Sure, sorry.
That's all right.
So are you speaking of where the timbers,
No, right across the street from the sales center and on the beach walker side of parcel 13B, since in conjunction with the start of the Cape clearing process, there were trees, substantial number of trees cleared. There's a clear-cut area, large clear-cut area that's occurred since that time. The standards say that should not occur until there's been a final approval with regard to development of that parcel. Has that final approval been approved and submitted to the town in Toki?
Brad, that's what I said was, we need to go back and show you the plan that was developed in term, I'm sorry? The plan that was approved to allow for that limited clearing in that area. We'll show you the plan.
I'm not asking about a plan, Mark. Was there a final approval of
I will
the
say,
site plan?
I will say it's a final approval of in advance of a site plan for that site. Now, I don't know how many times I can say it, we'll provide you that information. And the only thing I would add to that, it was based upon an existing tree and topo survey too, so it wasn't just arbitrary.
Another question with regard to...
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, but said another way, if there is an explicit question, provide an explicit answer, and we're going to publish it, please. If that's okay with the two of you, because I'm not as familiar with this, so that people understand the types of questions and the types of answers. I guess that applies to as much as we can.
The landscape standards also provide, with regard to existing vegetation, that natural buffers, especially along lot lines, shall be preserved and enhanced. Trees, shrubs, and understory vegetations should remain dense from ground level up to 10 feet and remain intact within 5 feet of the property line. Was that the case around the entirety of the Cape project?
Buffer area, setback area.
Except for where there's actually I'm sorry. Forgetting. So are you referring to the perimeter around the site, or are you referring, I mean, there are not any,
If you walk right along, for example, along the boardwalk,
yeah, here's the plan.
Well, or there's the plan.
right along the
Right.
boardwalk, the standards say that existing vegetation 10 feet from the property line shall be maintained. Was it maintained all around the perimeter within the property line? If you're walking along the beach walk or boardwalk, it was not. You look there,
Are you
you're
speaking
30
of,
feet.
are you speaking of this zone?
Right, everywhere around here, right here. Was there 10 feet of vegetation retained there along that side?
So if we'd have to, we have to look at each individual.
I can tell you just, I
plan.
encourage anybody to walk along the beach walk or boardwalk, and it was not.
Have you seen, is the property line staked?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, here's the clearing plan. Well, let me get one that's more legible.
Well, apart from the clearing plan, the standards specify that can't be clear. There's no discretion afforded.
Actually, and it says remain intact within 5 feet of the property line.
Oh, I'm sorry,
Right,
my
right, right. Yeah, so here's that, I don't have a scale on me, so I don't want to misspeak, but I mean, it looks like it meets that, is the best answer that I can give you looking at this plan. And
Okay,
based on
Jen,
what
I'll
I've
just
seen in the-
reiterate my comment. Jen, I'll just reiterate my comment.
Yeah.
Ask the question, write it down, please provide an answer that we can publish. And if you have a chart that speaks to that distance or
Sure.
whatever, so that everybody understands what you approved, the basis that you approved.
Sure.
And then next question.
I mean, it's on the plans.
Okey doke, all right.
Along Building 6, again, facing towards Cassique and Seabrook and down Sam Spit, I don't know, I can't read the plan, but along the beach walk or boardwalk, is there intended to be planted trees that will grow to the 60-foot height and screen the building from to the west?
There will be trees. 60-foot height is fairly rare on Kiowa, but
Those are actually trees. They weren't identified as trees. They were identified as shrubs in the landscape plan. But those are going to be trees?
these are the ones.
Well, again, I'm going to call the question. I'm sorry, I don't think this is getting productive for everybody. I can't follow this, none of us can follow this. Please ask the questions. We'll prepare, we'll work with Jen, we'll work with Tommy, we'll work with Amanda and Mark to prepare a response. I understand clearly the concern. We have to create another venue for that. The idea of a workshop is fine. I think that could be something. I'm not sure we're going to get into the detail of this particular project. I'll leave that up. Maybe we will or we won't. But we'll get questions, we'll get answers. We'll get questions and we'll get answers, and we'll publish them. Okay? Please. Thank you, Amanda and Mark, for meeting with us.
Thank you, Mayor. And I know there was a desire to kind of dismiss all of this as a minor mistake, and I did a poor job of framing this, I think, on behalf of the community, and that's on me. It's not just about whether 50 trees were replanted or not that were supposed to. It's more fundamentally, I think, whether or not the environment on Kiowa should dictate the mass and size of placement of buildings on lots, or vice versa. And increasingly, it seems like the landscape and the environment becomes subordinate to what the interests are of the commercial property developer with regard to where they would like to site buildings. And I think that's the fundamental issue that we're concerned about, particularly in the Beachwalker parcels and now the parcel 13B. Thank you.
You, sir, and every councilman, community association board member, mayor, president of the council, everybody's been concerned about this for a long, long time. There is nothing new here in terms of building hotels, East Beach, West Beach, golf courses. We've been building things around here for a long, long time. We're getting near the end. So this is a big issue. Everybody's been concerned about this. I don't know that the ARB, well, thank you for coming. I don't remember a session where they have been willing to come in here and just kind of expose themselves to the community and such and talk about that. So I appreciate that what they've done, and I appreciate their willingness to get back with the community relative to questions. Be careful of implications. Be careful of implications. This is the community that we love, and we love it because it is beautiful. You know, if there's discrepancies, mistakes, or unapproved design changes, everybody's ready to step up to them. Everybody's ready to step up to them. And the East-West folks did that within a matter of hours. So, you know. Okay. Motion to,
I'm sorry, if I could compliment Brad relative to the importance of the role of this. I do think, in addition to addressing specific questions, I really believe, whether we call it a workshop or whatever we want to call it, to get together, to, quite frankly, start from ground zero. Because this place was many decades in the making.
Right.
And our work on behalf of the contract we have with every property owner on Kiowa, with very rare exception, our work is out in the physical world every day. And we look forward to having the conversation so that we all can get better at what we're doing.
thank you. Okay, so you're going to organize the workshop? Or we'll organize?
We'll organize.
We'll organize the workshop. And again, questions, please send them in and we'll get you answers.
And for those of the KICA directors who are here are aware of this, but we will be having a workshop with them also.
Well, we don't need two, do we?
No.
Or do we?
I think that was.
I don't care. That's
yeah,
up to you guys.
that's. I think the more information, the better.
You got it. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you.